I so let's talk about. Can't explain what's in my brain. This is strange. So So, you can see. I'm a bed. Mushy keyboard. That's it. Time slug. That's crazy. I need to plug it in. How am I going to sort it?
What's up, YouTube? Static in the Attic, welcome back. I want to start this video by saying mud flood is a theory. But the more I dig into this subject and look at our history, it is a fact that all of our history comes from the last 200 years. We have a gap of 1,000 years in our history. So either it's being covered up and erased from our memory, or it simply didn't happen. But the fact is we have evidence all around the world of a worldwide civilization that had contact with each other. That evidence is being actively covered up and denied by mainstream academia.
Why is it? Yeah.
All I can say is Egypt is a great place to start with this, because here they just didn't do a very good job of covering their tracks with the cover-up. Egypt, man, if you're a truther and you've been curious about things and looking into things, then you've got an idea of Egypt, definitely. Because, I mean, just think of all of the information there is out there on the subject of Egypt, who built the pyramids, who, all this. But let me ask you this. What was the fall of Egypt? Can anybody answer that? Just like the fall of Rome, where everything just disappeared from history books. We have absolutely no explanation, and then you look at the old photographs and everything looks like this. It looks like a bomb has gone off here. And then the old etchings where it looks like, they're half digging out a canyon here. And pay attention to the bull here, because this is going to be important coming up later. Massive statue of an Egyptian pharaoh discovered in slum in Cairo. Archaeologists from Egypt and Germany have discovered the remains of an Egyptian statue. The 26-foot statue made of quartzite was found in groundwater in a working-class neighborhood in Cairo. So it sounds like this was just found in a well. A 26-foot statue of quartzite that nobody knew about and was down in the groundwater. And then we've got mummies that look like this. I mean, the guy looks almost Italian, But the question I'm going to ask here on this subject is that guy 2,000 years old? Has he really been mummified and so well preserved that is a 2,000-year-old mummy? I mean, you can see the shine of the light off of his forehead. There's still a gleam to that skin. And once again, it's just I'm sure everybody's heard of a million upas, you know, the out-of-place artifacts that are found all around the world, saying that we had cultures that knew one another. And, you know, a few years back, I remember hearing about the Egyptian mummies that were found with cocaine and nicotine in their system. Hey, the Egyptians like to party too. But there's only one place that cocaine comes from: the coca plants in South America. And nicotine, if I'm not mistaken, is all an American plant too, or so we're told. And then when you look at the old 19th century pictures of Rome, this is Rome, Italy, with a pyramid right there in the middle of it. Egyptian obelisk with hieroglyphics all over it. I think that's the same obelisk. And here is another one. And just, I mean, plain as day. So was the obelisk just sitting there and everybody was wondering where it came from for 1,000 years? Is that the way that went down? So we've got the story of the Coptics, okay? And I'm going to save you a whole bunch of Wikipedia bull here, and I'm just going to go straight down to the bibliography. And the most prominent of these Coptic historians are, instead of clicking on each one, I'm just going to tell you about them. We've got John of Nikiu. He was a bishop in 696. And then we've got Severus ibn al-Muqaffa. He was a bishop in 987. Then other of the most prominent Coptic historians are Friar Manessa Johanna, 1899 to 1930. Next guy down, Iris Habib al-Mesri, I know I'm butchering these names, 1910 to 1994. Labib Habichi, 1906 to 1984. Aziz Cyril Ataya, 1898 to 1988. Guys, it's really not hard the way that they rewrote history. You want to know how it's done? So you've got John here, you got source book number 1, and you've got service, source book number 2, and then you just charge tuition for the rest. Because what do you do when you go to school? Well, I want you to take these 2 source books that we have, and I want you to write me a 10-page essay on the life of Coptic women. So, Friar Manasseh, he reads John in service, and then he writes his essay on women in Coptic Egypt. And then next semester, Iris Habib shows up into class. They give him the same 2 source books, and they say, I want you to write me a 10-page essay on the living quarters of the Coptics. And so, hey, he writes, you know, and the whole class did it. It's just that these 2 happen to be the best 2 writers out of the class. And that's how the lie perpetuates. I've already covered in another video how in Spanish history, there was the 3 Andres that were basically responsible for, you know, all of the Spanish history. And they were paid, one guy stayed at this palace for 20 years writing books. That's what he was paid to do. He was paid to rewrite history. So you only have to come up with a couple of source books, and then it just perpetuates itself, and people actually think they know what they're talking about. So they're enthusiastically selling the lie. I've got about a 300-page book here that I got on the Ottomans. And let me go to the back of it. It's got about 10 pages of bibliography. 1983, 1983, 1997. 1987, 1992, 1850. We got one guy from 1850. It's just on and on and on. There's 6 pages of this. And the oldest that is in there is from the 1800s. So you've got 2 guys here. And who knows, you might be able to find more. But this is just a great example of how the lie is sold and perpetuated. So we've got this big, huge history of Egypt, right? Here's Karnak Temple. Place is humongous. I mean, look at this little lady here and then the huge pillars. But just look at all the editing here. We think that censorship is bad on YouTube. It's just because we caught them doing it. The thing is they've been doing this censorship and lying for a couple hundred years now. They've had plenty of time to come in here and, hey, they learned what they needed to know. And then if they don't want it generally known to the public, you just get rid of it. But again, my question is, are those pillars really a couple thousand years old that have just been forgotten about and lost to the sands of time? Because this is Fort Craig in New Mexico, USA. Basically the same climate, the desert Southwest. It was decommissioned in 1885. I could not find one attack on the fort in any written accounts. It was just abandoned after the Civil War, and they didn't use it anymore. That's, what, 140 years that's been sitting abandoned. This is 2,000 years that this has been sitting abandoned. So really the point I'm trying to make with that is just that we don't know. And I mean, honestly, with ancient Egypt, I still have some cognitive dissonance thinking that, hey, these guys might have still been around just a couple hundred years ago. But I don't know. You know, maybe the pyramid builders did die out 2,000 years ago. But one thing I know for sure is the land wasn't empty for 1,000 years. Excuse me one second. And so just look at the dates here on all of our Egyptologists. We got one from 1763. I'll tell you right now that's one of the older dates you're going to find in this list. Just keep checking out those dates as I'm scrolling down. And now I'm going to speed it up a little bit because I'm just going to show. Look, they're all from the 1800s, basically. You know, a few dates they'll throw back to the 1770s. But evidently, until Napoleon showed up in Egypt, just nobody knew anything about it. The Coptics didn't keep any records for themselves. Nobody knew anything about the people prior to them. And then nowadays, who do we have? We have this D-bag, Zahi Hawass, the end-all, be-all of anything and everything in Egyptology. If he poops rainbow sherbet in the Egypt world. If he says it's fact, then it's fact, and that is it. But, so, look, each one of these guys that you're seeing on your screen is just the lead of an expedition. So he had a small army under him or her, whoever's leading the expedition here, of hundreds, if not thousands of people. And just look at how many of these Egyptologists, grave robbers, history thieves there are. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. But like I said at the beginning, we've all got an idea of what ancient Egypt was. We know all about it, right? Well, we know all about it from the last 200 years. Before that, evidently nobody knew anything about Egypt, including the people that lived there. And then, you know, they find crazy things like the staircase in the middle of the desert just going, I mean, it's going somewhere. They won't tell us where. But, you know, this guy, this is Disclosed TV. This might just be the site of the legendary Black Pyramid the Kemet had taken apart before the European archaeologists got there in the 1700s. Now, I haven't heard of the Black Pyramid, but I'm kind of curious now. But they're saying that it could have been taken apart in the 1700s. And like he says here, the comet, the Greeks called Egypt, Egypt. The people that lived in what we call Egypt never referred to Egypt as Egypt. It was Kemet or Mizraim or Mizrael. I can't remember exactly which one. Anyway, I'll leave this in the links because in this video right here, they go up to the top of the Sphinx and they look down this hole. There's a hatch up there, like a hatch in a ship. It's like a manhole cover that they open up, and there's a shaft going down into the head of the Great Sphinx. We've all heard of the Hall of Records being below there, but evidently there's a hatch on the head of the Sphinx. So we really don't know. And we get this BS story of cultural layers. This is why all of our history is buried, is because of cultural layers. This is 20 feet down if it's an inch. And it's hard enough that they drilled in here and anchored in to put a steel support in to keep it from collapsing on them. These guys are 20 feet down. These guys are 20 feet down below them. And just look at all these huge chunks and boulders everywhere. Now, when was the last time you went out to mow your yard and you had to go around and pick up all the cultural layer rocks the size of footballs before you could mow? Because we all know these cultural layer stones just appear out of nowhere. And if your house is 100 years old, then, it's naturally about 2 feet buried by now because that's just the way things are, right? And we certainly don't have anything that's going to explain why we find 12-foot sarcophagi buried out in the middle of the desert. Now, let me play you a little video here, which should have been queued up. Okay, I think it still is. So, just listen to what they're saying here. I mean, this is just how history works. It's a bunch of quote-unquote historians taking guesses.
The African peoples were very taken with the showy Eastern goods and quite indifferent to the yellow metal that was found in such abundance there.
They were just indifferent to gold, The Phoenicians would show up to trade with them, and they'd trade all their goods for the gold, but evidently the Africans were too dumb to realize that, hey, they really want this gold, so it must be worth something, That's really the history that they sell us.
This was the great bargain for the Phoenicians, leaving inexpensive pottery and jewelry, and setting off again with gold. The ship would now head north. Excavations in England and Ireland have revealed that the Phoenicians reached even these far-off lands. Numerous finds...
Now, in a video I did a little while back, I even covered how Connie Clavin, a bog man that was found in the peat bogs there, had a hair pomade that was of Mediterranean herbs. So they dated him at 300 BC and openly admit that they had a trade network going from Ireland to the Mediterranean in 300 BC, but then nobody knew about each other for 1,000 years.
Have indicated that in exchange for pottery and jewelry, the northern peoples gave tin, a metal that was in great demand for producing bronze and the other alloys used by the Phoenicians and Greeks. Ireland was the most northerly landing point for Phoenician voyages, and having traded their goods, the sailors could now make the return journey. The trips always held the portent of danger. In the storms of the North Atlantic, the brave commanders would safeguard their ships and cargoes by tying themselves to the bow so that they could see more clearly and avoid the cliffs. It was from there that they gave instructions to the crew. If they were lucky enough to make it through, they would head south to the Phoenician colony of Cadiz. Here the Phoenicians bought iron and paid for it with gold. Then they traveled on to Majorca, and from there to the rich colonies of Sardinia. It's here that an archaeological dig uncovered a gold mine. Not a seam or stratum of gold, but a huge array of precious gold jewelry, now on display in the Archaeological Museum in Cagliari. Since Sardinia has never had gold deposits, the precious metal must have come from Africa.
And there the truth comes out. Since Sardinia doesn't have gold deposits, then the next logical conclusion is that it must have come from South Africa. They don't know. And here's the big problem that they're not pointing out is, did you see all that really nice gold jewelry found in an archaeological dig? Now, who just leaves this behind? Who just says, well, okay, I don't need this anymore? I mean, they'll probably say that it was a ceremonial burial. When it comes to archaeology, all people did was worship the gods. I mean, anything and everything was ceremonial or worship, or, I mean, they never lived anywhere. They didn't eat anywhere. They just worshiped all the time. But anyway, so they uncover all of this finished gold jewelry, a big hoard of it, with no explanation of why it's buried in the first place. Why are you pulling out all this pottery and gold jewelry? And here's a star for it here at Old Carthage, which was the main port of the Phoenicians. And then when you look at the ruins at Carthage, here's the old stonework base. And what is this up here? I mean, yeah, they dug some arches out of it, but this is dirt and rock. I mean, up here you can definitely see the big stones coming out of it. Brickwork with mud flood all over it. I mean, how else am I supposed to look at that? So let's get into some of the dates on everything, because I did come on here and I was the one that started going, hey, yo, look, everybody, we've got all of these earthquakes recorded from the 1812 era, so that is probably the most likely time for some catastrophes to happen. It was only recorded in America, though, and honestly, for me, I'm still kind of having a problem with that timeline, because, you know, it seems like you got to go back to the 1600s in Europe for where a reset would have occurred. Now, where I'm at personally with things right now is, if they were going to add in 1,000 years, it happened at this time, just after, I'm showing the Jesuit founding here, but you guys have probably heard this name, Joseph Scaliger, and the Scaligerian chronology. Scaliger was considered to be the foremost scholar in 16th century Europe, referred to as the light of the world, the sea of sciences, and similar epithets. And it was to him that we owe a modern definition of chronology. So it was Joseph Scaliger and the Jesuit Dionysius Petavius that basically said that all of our history happened in this order. And so whenever any digs come up, any evidence comes up, it's always the Jesuit schools that are the first ones in there to make sure that everything fits in the timeline. And we've got tenured professors with their whole careers built on BS information and can't upset the norm there. They've already dedicated that much time to it. That's the way it's got to be. If you find anything outside of that, then it's a blow to their ego, so they are going to do everything they can to suppress your new find. It's just the way of the world. But so it seems to me like the most likely time for the reset, if they were actually throwing in 1,000 years, it would have been here in the 1600s. And I've had my suspicion this whole time. Anybody that's been on my channel since the beginning knows how much I was questioning the long 18th century at the beginning of all this. And the more I get into it, I think I'm onto something here. I'll show you in a second. But this is the Gregorian calendar change. You know, this is all happening here at the same time in our history, according to the official chronology. And so it took the Holy Roman Empire from 1544 to 1583 to adopt the Gregorian calendar. It was a slow change in all of these places that took up to 100 years plus. And, you know, Russia being one of the last ones, it took from 1700 to 1918. So people weren't too excited about switching over to the Gregorian calendar. And we get the story that in England, people were rioting because of the time change. And they're saying that it was because they added 13 or it jumped 13 days or something. And people felt like their lives were being stolen. They had stolen time from them. I think there's more to it than that. I'm just going to leave it right there. That's just my personal feelings on things. So also at this time was the Protestant Reformation, and there was a split in the Catholic Church, but somehow they just continued to get more and more powerful. And this was also the time of the French Renaissance, or the rebirth. That's a very well named time in history, because it's immediately following the Middle Ages that seem to have not existed or are being completely covered up, one or the other. And then we had the rebirth of civilization and the history of civilization. And so the Renaissance also witnessed the discovery and exploration of new continents and the substitution of the Copernican for the Ptolemaic system of astronomy. Now, there's been the flat earth debate going on for years on here, and, you know, that's what the Ptolemy system is, if anybody didn't know already. Ptolemy is the geocentric, and I'm just going to say, I'm not going to get into it on this video, but look, everybody keeps fighting about it. Everybody's slinging mud. Nobody can even have an adult conversation about it. But I can draw out some things that make a lot of sense either way, on a globe or on flat. If you understand how both of them work, it's a convincing argument either way. And as an indication of exactly how good the Ptolemy model is, modern planetariums are built using gears and motors that essentially reproduce the Ptolemaic model. When I was up at the planetarium in San Francisco, I even asked the guy at the projector, I said, is that really a Ptolemy model that is running this? And he said, yes, flat out. But it turns out that the whole flat earth, round earth debate is a major, major clue to our history and understanding this timeline. I'm not going to go into it in this video. If anybody knows what I'm talking about and has it figured out, I'd love to hear from you in the comments. I always enjoy hearing from the critical thinkers out there. So, I've been going through these old books of the 1600s. I left off in the American Southwest for a reason. I stopped reading from that book from 1671 because I wanted to explore these books a little further. And I've seen other channels using them too. I think I know what's going on. And I'm going to have to do a video just on this, the reset, and the printing press, because this is the beginning of the narrative, I'm pretty sure. These books are all addressed to the king and look all official, and there's a lot of them, and it looks to me like it's the dime westerns of the day. Because these dime westerns came out like in the early 1900s. They were huge, and it was all about the shoot 'em ups and the poker games and the gunslingers and, you know, the whiskey drinking and, you know, all this. Look, we've all heard of the shootout at the OK Corral. When you actually look into the historical value of that, it was like 5 guys that had a shootout. Now, it was a vendetta between the two groups, just like the Hatfields and McCoys. The reason those stories are so famous is because they're so far outside of the norm. When you have a family that's, or 2 different groups, in the case of the OK Corral, that are killing each other and causing a bunch of problems, it wasn't the norm, and that's why those stories grew into the huge legends they are. And then, now we've got the Hollywood idea that has just completely blown everything out of proportion. So, like I said, these are glorification stories painting a picture of the past, okay? And that's what I am starting to think that all of these tight print books were. Before the printing press, books would have been much more valuable and would have been handwritten. And, like the famous burning of the books in Nazi Germany, how many times has that happened? Because before this printing press, and even, I was just talking about Victor Hugo and how he kept making references to the printing press being the end of the world and how they wanted to burn the king's books. He was dropping hints that they were changing history and that everybody was upset about it. So, how do I know all this? Here we have the Apis Sive Osiris, the Bull of Osiris, in 1621. Let's go to some official history. The Apis cult continued until the rise of Christianity in the 4th century. The rise of Christianity gave rise to the Coptic language. The Coptic language was really only around for a few years, evidently, and disappeared. Anyway, the eternal bull, who symbolized Egyptian values, was incompatible with the new Christian vision, and the rituals surrounding the bull declined. The Serapeum of Ptolemy I was destroyed by zealous Christians circa 385 CE in their efforts to eradicate pre-Christian beliefs in Alexandria. In the 5th century CE, the Apis cult was banned along with other pagan sects and rituals as the Christian understanding of the universe and divinity became dominant. So by the 5th century AD, rise of the Coptic language, Christianity in Egypt, 1621, this guy goes down for a visit and he's putting the Bull of Osiris on his book. This is 200 years before all of these Egyptologists. Now let's read a little bit about what this book says. Starting right here, most of the inhabitants of Cairo consist of merchants and artificers, yet the merchants frequent no foreign marts. All of a trade keep their shops in one place, which they shut about the hour of 5, and solace themselves for the rest of the day, cooks excepted, who keep theirs open till late in the evening. For few but such have great families, dress meat in their houses, which the men do buy ready dressed. The women, too fine-fingered, do meddle with housewifery, who ride abroad upon pleasure of easygoing asses, and tie their husbands to the benevolence that is due, which if neglected, they will complain to the magistrate and procure a divorcement. So the wives here have a pretty luxurious life, it sounds like, and in the evening they hop on their donkeys and go for nice little evening strolls, and if their husband treats them bad, then they divorce his ass, as they should. But does that sound anything like the Sharia law Islamic background of Egypt that we're told, of this whole area, the Ottoman Empire? All this yellow area was Ottoman Empire from the time of the Crusades all the way up until about the 1800s. Yeah. So I got to looking into the maps of the era, which are, this is 1609. We're going to start here, and then we're going to go back to some older ones. Right next to the pyramids, and like I said, they knew all about Egypt. They knew where the pyramids were at this time. They know where all of these cities are, and look at the names of these cities. Aphrodites, just like the Greek god Aphrodites. Bacchus, it's spelled differently, but sounds a lot like Bacchus. Ptolemy Statio. Now, Ptolemy was back around, I think, 300 AD. Don't quote me on that. Look it up for yourselves. Anyway, Ptolemy Statio, which statio means place where in the Roman Rite a devotion to the Stations of the Cross is celebrated. It's a Christian thing. And, I do have the date. Claudius Ptolemy, Greco-Roman mathematician, astrologer, and geographer, AD 100 to 170. But in 1609, we still have Ptolemy Statio here. When you go down here, here's Hermopolis, way away from the Nile. Modern day Hermopolis is right here, right in the Nile Valley. And Babylon, Egypt. Now, I did find the fortress of Babylon, but it actually showed it way up here in the Delta. There's really not a good explanation of why they are showing Babylon right here. And Babylon right here. And by the way, what we call Cairo, right next to the pyramids, the city of Cairo, evidently they were calling Memphis back in the day. That's showing Memphis right there at the mouth of the Nile into the Delta. This is Memphis. So let me expand this and show you what else is going on with this map, because here we have Pithom and Migdol from Exodus. I'm sure quite a few people noticed that. So Migdol just means a tower in Hebrew. So that could have been one of any places. But Pithom, the Hebrew Bible sources exist for this city, but its exact location remains somewhat uncertain. Do they look uncertain about where these places are on this map? And I'm telling you, that's not it. Here's Mount Sinai. I mean, look, every one of the numbers here. I'll get to the pictures in a second. Here's Mount Sinai. You want to know where Mount Sinai is? You walk down the coast of the Gulf here and take a left and walk a couple days, and there's Mount Sinai. And then you go up here, you turn around. Look, it's the whole journey of the Exodus on the map. It's not like they're guessing about it. And then up here they have all the cool illustrations on it. Here's Moses being put into the river. And I don't know why there are so many babies floating down the river here. This is like the orphan train of the biblical days, I guess. I don't know what's up with that. And then here's Moses going in front of Pharaoh. But look at Pharaoh and his magicians. Does this look like the ancient Egyptians that we all have pictured in our head? I mean, I understand that I've been heavy Hollywoodized myself, but I hope everybody else realizes this, because this just doesn't look anything like what I've got in my head of the Egyptian Pharaoh. And this is where he threw his he had Aaron cast down his staff and it turned into a snake, and then the magicians, they did it, and Aaron's snake ate the other snakes. But look at Moses back here. See those horns? Here's the Passover. Here's the angel of death outside. Here's crossing the Red Sea. Here's getting water from the rock. Look, again, Moses with horns. Big battle. Don't know which one. Moses with the 10 Commandments. I think this might be the manna. I don't know. But, okay, so, look, Moses with horns. Now, if you've never heard of this, I've seen it in art several times. During the Renaissance period, this is how Moses was depicted, as having horns. This site says that it's often said that, it's jamestabor.com. It is often said that this is a simple matter of mistranslation resulting from the fact that the Hebrew word for horn, kareen, happens to be also the Hebrew word for a ray of light. But St. Jerome, who made the translation called the Vulgate, which the Vulgate is the Bible that was adopted by the Catholic Church in the 16th century. At the end of Jerome wrote the Vulgate at the end of the 4th century, would not have made such a crude mistake. In fact, we know he was aware that Quran, the verb which he translated as had become horn, could also mean had become radiant, which makes this clear in his commentary of the book of Amos, written a few years later. This means that Jerome knew that the verse was understood as meaning Moses' face glowed and was rendered as such in nearly all the ancient Greek and Aramaic translations. Only one Greek translation available to Jerome, that by the Jewish convert Aquila, understood Quran to be had become horn, but nonetheless that this definition the Christian scholar chose to go with. Hence, Jerome must truly have believed that Moses came down from Mount Sinai with horns and not radiant. And so there are old poems of God and Moses, and God tells Moses he has chosen him to lead his people and that he has endowed him with superpowers, including fire eating fire and a special purple robe possessed of virility. It's really interesting, the clothes thing, because if you've looked into the book of Jasher, it talks about the skins of Adam that Noah had hidden on the ark, and he gave them to Ham. Ham gave them to Cush. Cush gave them Nimrod, who was described as a mighty hunter who was rebellious against God, and the skins gave him extra power. So it's like there's some magical something to these outfits from God. I placed horns of majesty on your head so that if an angel comes near you, you will gore him with them. Now, the angels have always been jealous of man, or some have. We've all heard of the Nephilim, the fallen angels, the Watchers. You know, pick your poison on that. You know, one of my thoughts on that, everybody will say it's because God gave man free will. Well, if the angels were able to rebel against God, then wouldn't they have free will? So I think why the angels were jealous of man is because God gave man godlike powers. We have the power to create and destroy in this physical realm. And so the jealous angels had to fall from heaven, from their plane of existence, from a different place. I don't think they can have contact with the physical realm. I think something, I'm not sure, it says that they came down and impregnated human women. I don't know how that happened, because I don't think angels are capable of coming into the physical realm, just like they say that Satan can't interfere directly. He can only deceive and cause you to go astray. Anyway, just some speculation there. But Moses taunts the angel, saying, I will not descend. I will not descend until I prove myself a hero, until I gore your bodies with my horns. So, (1609), the whole Renaissance era, it seems like everybody was thinking of Moses with horns. Just thought I'd throw all that out there. I don't know what it means, but it's pretty damn interesting. Now, when we go back just a little bit further, from apparently 1575, now they're saying, blow that up to where you can see it. Let me translate this for you. Cairo, what once Babylon, Egypt, great city. Cairo, what once was the great city of Babylon. It's the way it looks like this was telling the story just before the French Renaissance maps. And down here we have the pyramids and the Sphinx, and they're all up on mesas. It's not a plateau like modern day. And down here, when I had a hard time with these translations. I do know that it says masa is Latin for mesa, just like it's drawn on a mesa. And then you've got Thraci Meretrix. Meretrix is whore. So the Thracian whore, and let me see if I can find, I'd love to just read it verbatim, but I couldn't figure out everything it said. So let's start at the top here, and it just says something, a single rock buried alive, pieces, which faces 10. Like I said, I was having a hard time with all that, but then it gets down to the Thracian whore from king in marriage tied after the death of this capital, and come at business Peter the Martyr something. So if anybody wants to take a stab at their Latin there, good luck. Now, there's a bridge. At first I was thinking this might have been an aqueduct, but when you translate that out, it is saying, where are we at? This bridge passes increasing Nile, whatever that means. But look, there's a door on the pyramid. There's a very obvious walkway leading to the bottom of the mesa, and now it's all plateau. So I don't know if this is more evidence of the mud flood. In my opinion, I'm saying yeah. But according to this map, in the 1500s, they knew all about the pyramids. They knew. And look, it even looks like a obelisk down here in the delta, or in the Nile basin anyway. And we've got pyramids stretching out quite a ways up north. So basically, the Egyptian dynasty disappeared. We don't really know anything about it, just like everywhere else in the world. And then all of a sudden in 1575, then they're saying, well, yeah, this was the ancient city of Babylon. And here's another map that is 1578. And when you come down here to the notes at the bottom. Right here, Cairo Vecchio della Antica, I'm guessing antique, Detto Babylonia. And number 25 is this little strip of houses here. So are they saying that this is the ancient city of Babylon? I don't know. The Tower of Babylon is the same. I believe it's the same word Migdal that I was covering just a minute ago. The Hebrew word, which means a tower. So I don't know what all it means. I did want to share that, but I do know that we've been lied to a lot. And look, here, the Sphinx has boobs. Now, I have seen pictures that I think were the Sphinx being dug out, but at this point in life, I'm not too sure anything. But when I take a closer look at the Sphinx, all these look like pretty new stones down here, to where all this is just completely falling apart. I could definitely argue that that's because this was buried. But when you look at the surrounding area, I don't know if I've got a picture of it pulled up. I mean, everything was buried. We have pictures just prior to the 1800s, when all of the Egyptology and everything that we know about Egypt has come to light, everything that has come to us in that time frame. But then we still have the pictures where everything is buried, and they were showing that the Sphinx was on top of a mesa, just like the Great Pyramids were on top of a mesa. And I want to see if I can find a picture of the surrounding area of the Sphinx, because when you look at what it was dug out from, I mean, it looks like hard compressed sandstone all around. Look at the background back here. I mean, this isn't just sand that's blown up here. I mean, this looks like hard packed, the same sandstone that I'd find down here at the beach. And it's obviously had a few remediations. I'm not even going to say remodels. But like I said, there's a trapdoor in the head of the Sphinx that leads down into here. And right here, you see this stone that is kind of pulled off to the side? Looks like somebody had been up in there. And all I know is they had a really long time to be Egyptologists and go out there and get their whole story straight and learn what they wanted to learn. And man, seriously, who did this? How did they do this? Look at these two stones. This is the actual entrance to the pyramid. Just look at the size of these things. So like I said at the beginning, the mud flood thing is a theory, but when you get to digging into things, and it's been just about any subject that I've come across, it would appear that all of our history is only a couple hundred years old. And that's where we get our whole story of everything throughout the ages. And it looks a lot to me like it goes straight up to the 4th and 5th century. You've got the fall of Rome, evidently the fall of Egypt too. And then the world just goes blank for 1,000 years. And then mankind gets smart all of a sudden, smart enough to read and write, to keep records, and to make the world that we live in. I mean, just look around you. Any asphalt road, any wood construction you see, this is all from the last 200 years. I mean, this world was nothing like what we see today 200 years ago. Nothing at all. So I'm going to end this one like I always do. I always end by saying we are all one. And I wanted to explain that a little bit, because I'm not promoting some communist agenda or anything like that. I mean, spiritually, metaphysically, however you want to say it, we are all one. We all are in this material world on a level playing field. And it seems like there is I'll just call it the Luciferian agenda of being in love with this world and the material things and power and greed and lust and, you know, the 7 deadly sins. The 7 deadly sins, if you really look at them, those could only come about from the material world. You know, what are they? I think I even wrote them down. Sloth, greed, wrath, all these things. It's all from the material world. And we all come here, and for some reason, it's like we just have amnesia. We don't remember what was before this. And I'm sorry if, you know, some people that are Christians and read the Bible think that I'm not going to say what other people think, but the impression that I got when I was younger was that you were nothing before this, and then all of a sudden my soul popped into existence in 1977, and I can't agree with that, just like I can't agree that a dog has no soul, or any animal doesn't have a soul. Anything that has a life force has that spark, has that little spark of divinity. And that's what I'm talking about when I say we are all one. This whole realm, this whole everything is all one big thing. I should have tried to figure out how to explain this better beforehand, but it's an inescapable one big thing. And so if you want to take the Bible as the end all be all of it, to me it just seems like there's parts of that are missing, that's being withheld from us, is the way I look at it. But even then, in the beginning, God said, let there be light. What happened there? He said something. That vibration, it's the voice that gave rise to all material. It's like the voice, the vibration just ripped through space-time and started, as a result, spring forth all of this creation. But it doesn't matter how you look at it. We are all part of one thing, the good and the bad. There's balance to everything. There's the positive and the negative. And so while we're here stuck in this human form, with no way out of here, and we're not sure how we got here, and we know that a lot of people are lying to us and trying to deceive us, I just think it's better to just, if nobody's done you any harm, just tell them, I love you, and you need to take care of yourselves out there, because we are all one. If that made any sense. Static out. Welcome back, YouTube. I'm Static in the Attic, and this is part 3 where we start connecting the dots and dropping bombs. I want everybody to take a look at what you're seeing on the screen right now. It will be on the quiz here shortly. So let's first look at this earthquake in Baja. So look at all of that dust being kicked up on the mountainside there.
Montañas.
You guys see all of that dust? This is what happens in major earthquakes. Okay? That's all the rocks falling down. That's that mountain falling apart. And that's a 7.2 earthquake. This is a flash flood.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, oh wow.
Wow.
Wow. You're lucky you're not dead, buddy. You're not in a very good position, guys. I've been all through all these canyons out here. Hopefully he's not boxed in. I didn't see him die at the end. But just imagine if you were in the way of this. And this is just a flash flood, guys. This is just a little rain. All right? It happened 50 miles up the road. And then this is what you get down at the bottom.
Big time flash flood here.
Yeah.
Big time.
Big time. Now just imagine if you were standing out there. All right? Like I said, that's just normal. That happens out in the desert all the time. Now, keep in mind that we're over aquifers everywhere on the earth, okay? By definition, there are aquifers everywhere on earth. So, I'm just going to say this. If they can get us divided to where everybody's arguing about the shape of the earth, then that just shows me that we need more answers about where we live, this realm that we live in, because obviously everybody's questioning it. But it would appear that all the ground we live on floats, because when you have a big earthquake, I didn't put it in here, but you guys can look at all the water that comes up after all the big earthquakes. So this is just documented fact, all right? And I sent this info out to some of the other content creators thinking that I just busted the case and it'd make perfect sense to them, but apparently either it didn't or they got off track for one reason or another. But I'm just going to say, anybody that's turning the information that I am presenting to you into a J.R.R. Tolkien novel probably doesn't have your best interest in mind, because what I'm presenting, it doesn't take any stretch of the imagination to put two and two together here, okay? And guys, always check the description box, please, because I leave little nuggets in there, and anything that I think of afterwards, I can always throw that back in there. All right? So, you see this big mountain reservoir up here, and how everything's on top of water. Now, what if you have a big, huge earthquake? What's going to happen downstream of the big, huge earthquake when that reservoir gives way? So let's start right here with Occam's razor. Occam's razor is the problem-solving principle that initially states that simpler solutions are more likely to be correct than complex ones. When presented with competing hypotheses to solve a problem, one should select the solution with the fewest assumptions. So basically, the simplest answer is usually the best answer, okay? And even one of my favorites here from Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, what? Yeah, you get it. So, sorry, I'm still a little bit brain fried. I've been doing a ton of research to get all this ready. So, Sherlock Holmes, how often have I said to you that when you have eliminated the impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, must be the truth? Because all I've done here, guys, is I've studied every subject under the sun for 20 years, looking for truth. And when you chisel away all of the falsities, then you should just be left with one truth, right? Because the truth is the truth. All right, now back to maps. Let's really make sense of all this. So here we are in southern Africa. Okay? Let's go ahead and take a good look at this map. Now, what we're focusing on is this lake right here up in the mountains. This right here is Lake Victoria. That's still there. Guess what's not still there? And let's just throw in another map for good measure. This map, Lake Victoria right here. Big, huge lake. And remember, guys, the Nile runs north. Nile runs north. Okay? And then, so these two maps are, let's check the dates real quick. This map is 1661. This map is 1602. But then for some reason, in the 1750, they needed a new and exact map of Africa. Why did you need a new map? And it's the same thing all around the world. New maps were made all around the world after the beginning of the 19th century. So let's take a good look at this map real quick. Get everybody on the same page. Big, huge lake up in the mountains at the top of the Nile. Alright? Big, huge lake up in the mountains right here. All these rivers, all these mountain ranges. Okay? And now, look at what we find here. Alexandria. Alright? Cairo appears to be over here. Alright? So, and look at the scale of this thing. Guys, map making was very important, all right? They didn't just draw a big lake like this for no reason, okay? This lake is half the size of Madagascar, okay? And I'm going to go ahead and throw in this big, huge lake over in America, to where I've actually been. The Great Salt Lake is over here now. And verdict's still out on saltwater, seawater, still working on it. But I know this country like the back of my hand. I can drive here right now without a map. I know all the lands west of the Rockies, guys. This is all up at 5,000 feet elevation and above. And this all used to be a big mountainous plain, because when you go to Utah now, you see all the... when you're looking across those big, huge canyons, it just looks like a chunk was tore out of the earth. Okay? Now let's get to Google Maps. So this is Lake Victoria. This is where that old lake used to be. And look what it's all surrounded by. If this thing will load. I'll just tell you, it's all national parks. All national parks. Everywhere around the world, you find one of these lakes that used to be there 200 years ago, before the earthquakes, and it's all national parks now. All the UNESCO World Heritage Sites. Guys, connect the dots. So, what was the picture that I showed you earlier? The first picture that I showed you is obviously the Grand Canyon, right? Grand Canyon? No. This is the Fish River in Namibia. Look at this. Doesn't that look exactly like the American Southwest? All the gorges, all the ravines. Here's the Grand Canyon. Here's Namibia. Now let's look at that on a map. Namibia that was down here, okay? Down at the bottom of the mountain from this big, huge lake that was up here, you have that. And then, over in America, the Grand Canyon, right here, right below this big, huge lake, looks exactly identical. I'm telling you right now, guys, all the sciences were designed for one reason and one reason only, to steer you away from the truth. This is not billions of... When you're walking along the top of the Grand Canyon, they have a timeline and all these placards that are set up. And it says 1 million years ago, 2 million. And I mean, it just goes on and on up to 1 billion years ago. Them trying to explain why this river carved all this out, but the Mississippi River is just... it's still flat. All the other, most of the other rivers in the world. And when I was living in Colorado, I remember looking at... there was a really sharp turn in a river with really raging water, and I'm looking at this rock, and there's no erosion in the rock at the turn. And I'm sitting here thinking, well, how long has this river been flowing like this? Because it hasn't carved into that rock one little bit. So, Grand Canyon and then Fish River, Namibia look exactly the same. What else do we have? Well, here's Victoria Falls. You guys have heard of this, right? Victoria Falls, where it looks like the whole earth just fell out from under it. All right? And where's that at? That's right here below that big, huge lake that was up here. What else do we have? Well, we've got the Gunnison Black Canyon over in Colorado that looks exactly the same, like the earth just fell out from under it. Victoria Falls just happens to have water falling through it, so it's these big, beautiful waterfalls. But look, it's the exact same thing. And Black Canyon is located right here to the right of where that old lake used to be. Victoria Falls. Black Canyon. Exact same geological structures on opposite ends of the world. Occam's razor, guys. That's all I'm going to say. Occam's razor. All right. Now, I've taken a long route to get here to this point, to get you guys to this point. I'm doing this for a reason. I want you guys to understand all of Western European history that we were taught in school before we even consider talking about America. Because it's all going to make sense once we get there. So, let's get back to history here. Oh. So, guess what we find up at the bottom of the Nile? Remember, the Nile's flowing north. And right here, in the old location of Alexandria, because, you know, we all know that it makes perfect sense that warring armies came in and just burnt all of the knowledge of the old world, because that's what we do today. If we were to go over and take over China, we'd just destroy all the work that they've done on jets and everything, all the knowledge that they have. We'd destroy it because we hate them that much. We wouldn't use the knowledge that they have. We'd just destroy all of it because we just hate them that much. They've been ruining our lives this whole time. So there's cities being found all over the Mediterranean. All right, and of course it's a 1,200-year-old Egyptian city. And look at what's at the bottom of it. All these big, huge stone carvings. Come on. Bear with me, guys. I'm doing my best here. Doing my best. All right. Okay, so while this is loading, let's just keep going with, there we go. Okay, so in 1747, King Ferdinand VI of Spain had to declare that California was not an island. Actually had to declare that to everybody. And it wasn't because of bad map making, it's because it all of a sudden became an island. Or was no longer an island. It was all of a sudden connected to the mainland. So just finish off Alexandria here. Look at that. Just amazing. All right, and this is all, I think, 6.5 kilometers off of today's coastline. All right, right here. So that's only 3 miles off the coast, all right? And there's all kinds of cities just buried all over the Mediterranean, all right? So let me throw this in real quick. The most expensive bottles of wine in the world. You got the Cheval Blanc of 1947, and I'm sure that this stash of 110 bottles was newly liberated after World War II. because we like to go in and drop a lot of bombs and free the crap out of everybody. And we got this bottle, 1951. And then we've got the Chateau Lafite of 1787. This is Thomas Jefferson's own personal stash. These are old world wines. These are probably getting priceless by now, all right? The Chateau Margaux of 1787, again, an old world wine, but here's what's really interesting. The Screaming Eagle Cabernet of 1992 is the most expensive bottle of wine in the world. 1 6-liter bottle of Cabernet from Napa Valley. One bottle. So I guess they just had one vine of grapes that was really, really good that year. Or Napa is right in here, shielded by the Sierra Nevadas. Somebody was digging around. And they found an old bottle of wine from the old world. Okay, so let's get back to history here. So, in music, I covered that the plague hit Paris 1 out of every 3 years. So let's talk about that was the 17th and 18th century, or 16th and 17th century. The plague hit 1 out of 3 years, killing everybody. They just couldn't shake that bug. It just kept coming back and killing everybody. So then, during the Reign of Terror, about 40,000 people were executed or murdered. So they went from everybody dying of the plague to everybody pissed off, and then they just started using guillotines and cutting everybody's heads off. All right? And then without missing a beat, Napoleon just all of a sudden jumps into power from 1792 to 1814 and conquers the whole world. He did sell off the Louisiana Purchase to America, supposedly, because he was so hell-bent on conquering the world that he just decided to sell his holdings over in the New World. That makes perfect sense, right? I mean, hey, I'm going to take over all of Europe, and I've got this great army, and it's going to disrupt everything in South America, North America, and everything, but I'm just going to sell that. Well, it's either that or they were all on the same team. So a map of the Napoleonic Wars. This is showing that he conquered all of this area that I discussed in music that is under the House of Habsburg. Supposedly they ruled this area from the 1300s up until the 1800s, or in the 1750s, the male line went extinct, and these guys just disappeared, but we have their coat of arms all over the damn place. Okay? So, the only reason that Portugal isn't on this is Portugal was actually founded in 1910. So, let's have a look at this area right here. Italy and the lower part of France and Croatia and all these places down through here. We already know that this was all House of Habsburg, supposedly. So, this was all ran by the House of Grimaldi. Oh, I have to go back one here. So the House of Grimaldi supposedly ran this whole area from 1642 up until the 1800s. And it says right here, somewhere in here it talks about, well, here, let's just go to the ancient regime. So the ancient regime, here you go, up until 1789, and then they just disappeared too. Okay? And they were the hereditary monarchy of the feudal system, because of course we were all warring tribes that just couldn't get along with each other. It just drove us absolutely up the wall to be farming peacefully in our own valley, miles away from everybody else. So we just had to go up the road and kill everybody, because that's our nature. That's us human beings. That defines us. That's how we live. That's how we roll. But see, these guys were all part of the French nobility. So, if all these guys were already friends with the French Empire, why the need for the war? Why did they have to go down here and take over? Why did they have to go over here and take over? These guys were all friends. Why the war? So, let's look at the House of Grimaldi coat of arms. And you've all seen the Knights Templar coat of arms. Knights Templar established 1119 to 1300. What else was there? Okay, anyway. So, look at all the crosses everywhere on all of these flags, okay? And especially this one. This is Georgia of the former Soviet Union. And if you've never heard of Astana, Kazakhstan, you guys have got to check this out. They might as well have just named this place Occult City, because everything in this city is just New World, occult, creepy, okay? So these guys have this big, huge, state-of-the-art city nestled way over here in Kazakhstan, far out of the eye's reach from the rest of the world. Okay? And when I say everybody was duped, this is how people get duped. See, not many people are going to go over here, but back in the day, when this tragedy occurred, the common people didn't even know, because the only way that they're getting news is the people that are actually out traveling and coming back. And now if you're stopping everybody at the front gates saying, what do you know? Go straight to the king, then they're controlling the knowledge. So the 19th century, can't see it very well, but that's Jerusalem's flag in the early 19th century. So I'm just going to leave that there. Food for thought. So they've got the same colors, same symbols on their flag at the early 19th century that the Knights Templar had. And now here, this is where rubber really meets the road, guys. So even by their own admission, the Knights Templar had to go up and around the mountains See, they had to go up and around the mountains to get down to Jerusalem and the Holy Land. So from France, they had to go up and around and down. Now, if these guys were all friends, why didn't they just jump in a boat and sail down there? What would have kept them from doing whatever they wanted, wherever they wanted? And there's only one answer, is that there were people here that didn't want them traveling through their seas. Get it? By their own admission, there was a time when they had to go up and over and around instead of taking the easy way. Dutch East India Company, founded in 1602. And look at their coat of arms. So the Knights Templar just took over they started the Dutch East India Company. I mean, that's all there is to it. And let's look at their trade. Now, this is their trade routes of the supposed 17th century. Even by their own admission, they could sell wherever they wanted, but they couldn't sell here. Why not? Now, for this next piece, I want to thank Benny Babaloo over in Britain. I'm really glad to hear that, people overseas are getting this message, because I want the whole world to look at what I'm looking at here. Because I think everybody needs to look at this and really start thinking. So, this is a book of the Dutch East India Trading Company, hand-signed 1818. Let's have a look in here. So, okay, we can clearly see that the date is 1778, 1779, 1780. But look at who they're hiring and how many people they're hiring. Okay, so you got like 2 people this year, 5 people this year. Okay, so this is up to 1793. Let's keep going. And these are all civil servants. And then 1794, 1795, hiring a few people here and there. More civil servants, more civil servants, more civil servants, more civil servants. Now, in 1814 or 1815 right here, watch what happens. So in 1815, all of a sudden, bam, they start hiring all kinds of people. And who do they hire? Judges. Why do you need judges? What lands are these guys judging? How are these guys getting positions of power? Because Napoleon took over the whole world that was supposedly already allies? Or did something big happen, and these jerks capitalized on it, sending in and appointing judges to rule over all the lands and the survivors? Judges, superintendents. And then comes the military. These guys start building an army, all right? Major general, colonel, lieutenant. That's it. They're in full swing now, all right? But I want you to watch what happens to the dates, okay? Army, 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 army. Now look at these dates, guys. 8/12, 8/11, 8/15. Because even back in the 90s, we said that, I graduated high school in 1995, so it was either 1995 or 95. We never said, well, yeah, I graduated in 995. Guys, all of these dates are saying 808, 808, 811, 814, 814. Was it because they didn't have room to put a 1 in? Or did they add in 1,000 years history? And I'm still trying to figure that out, exactly how much time was added in. Because it could be anywhere from 1,000 years to 1,100 years. It could have been 1,000 years and they just added in the 7th century. Or it could have even been from the 3rd century straight to 18th century. I don't know. But I do know that they added in a bunch of time, because we've got no history, no records of arts and sciences. We've got no record of anything before 200 years ago. And I've proven that until, I don't know what else to say. I can go through with a fine-tooth comb, or I just, for this video, I'm stepping out with a broader brush so that everybody can see. And, let's do a fine-tooth comb real quick. Morocco, established in 1956. And in Marrakech, the renovation of the Palace Lavadi went from a ruin to a grand palace in just 18 months, because it only took 18 months to dig the palace out. In France, in Montpellier, mid-18th century. This is after all the plagues, the French Revolution, and then world domination. And then things started getting good there, and a provincial city was built due to advances in winemaking. Just like I said about the old bottles of wine. This fueled the economy and led to another wave of away with something. While some of the grandiose projects never reach completion, many are still major features for tourists, like the incomplete Saint Roch or the Palais de Justice, and the spire at St. Anne's, where many people have been healed in recent times, and there are many crutches left at the stairs of the church. A couple of you guys have asked questions on that subject, and I'm just going to leave it right there for now. So, Bologna, Italy. 1614, the city was occupied by Austrians. So, now if the House of Grimaldi that was in charge of Italy was such good friends with France and House of Habsburg, then why did they need to be occupied in 1814? And then also in 1813, 15 years later, there was insurrection and then the Young Italy Party unrest. So the next generation growing up, they didn't like what was going on and they had problems. All right? So they got beat down, and then in 1860, another 30 years later, after another generation grew up, there was insurrection again. And then finally, Bologna became part of the Kingdom of Italy. And just some things that you'll find in Bologna. Here's a fun fact about the Fountain of Neptune, is that in the 17th, supposedly it was built in the 17th century by artist Peter Hussein. He created the statue, and across the statue were the 4-story townhouses where the Polish kings used to stay while visiting. Respectfully, the god Neptune is bowing his head to the kings, because that's how important these kings are. But in the second half of the 18th century, the statue got refurbished and extended with a new series of seashells. The source of that is Atlas Obscura. I'll just tell you, the 4-story buildings were taken down. They didn't want any part of that remaining on the statue. And then they put some seashells all over to cover up where they had cut it off. All right? It's just that simple. Monaco, France. The early history of Monaco is primarily concerned with the protective and strategic value of the Rock of Monaco, which served as a shelter for ancient people, and then later fortresses. So, like I said, guys, they are telling you all of science is completely straight backwards. They're saying right here that this was the ancient people of the Mediterranean, and I'm telling you, this is 250 years ago. The survivors of the catastrophe. They say from the fall of the Roman Empire to the 15th century, for 1,200 years, the area was contested for political reasons, but it has steadily remained under the control of the House of Grimaldi since 1297. So for 1,200 years, they were fighting and feuding and couldn't write a book, couldn't write a play, couldn't write a song, couldn't do anything. That is history, guys. That's the history that we're taught. All right, so that covers Dutch East India. And they started out of Amsterdam up here, this one little town. And all of a sudden, they took off and they had all the shipping lanes all over the world. All right. So now, I'm just throwing this in because this is a 1908 earthquake right here in Messina that destroyed between 75 and 200,000 lives. How did all these people die? Was it because of the skyscrapers falling on them? Or was it because of all the tsunamis and the ground giving way and all the bad stuff that happens during a major, major earthquake? And guys, this is a drop in the bucket compared to what I'm talking about. So let's look at Israel. Back to art and theater. Telling you guys, that's where it's at. Photos of the Holy Land from the from the 19th century sell for $1.4 million. Somebody really wanted these photos, and I'd love to have these photos to be able to go through that collection. But look at the state of Israel. I'm not even going to say Israel. Look at Jerusalem at the beginning of the 19th century. Remember that it wasn't until World War II that Israel became Israel. Alright, look at the Western Wall. Look at the ruins of all these houses. Now, I don't know if this has already been dug out. I don't know if it has been sitting there for 1,000 years. I don't know. But what I do know is the story we're being told doesn't make any sense. This is current day Western Wall. Alright. And you know, real quick, I forgot to mention that as I was getting all this together and making my video, it's a lot of work making these videos, guys. There's a lot. I'm digging through 20 years of things that I've known. I mean, like when I read a few years ago about the Egyptian statues out here that I showed you a little while ago. You know, I mean, this is years ago. And all of these people were decimated by a great catastrophe. Sylvie over at New Earth, right at the exact same time, put a video out 2 days ago. I'll try to leave it in the links. And she's talking about the people that lived in this region, all the peaceful people, the Cathars, and the supposed story about them was that they were just slaughtered. And it was like, they slaughtered like 300 of them. And yeah, they did. But there was only like 300 of them left. There were millions and millions of people here before that. I mean, do you think this land was just not occupied for 1,200 years, that nobody knew about the pyramids of Egypt that can be seen probably from the Mediterranean? And damn sure if you go up the Nile for a little while, you're going to see it. So it's crazy that Sylvie and I don't know each other. We're on different sides of the world, and we're both getting revelations about the exact same thing in the exact same area at the exact same time. So all I got to say is there's something really big going on here. Everybody all over YouTube is kind of all around the target right now. And just welcome to the awakening, guys. Wake up. Snap out of it. Seriously. So, $1.4 million paid to cover up this collection of photos. So, concerning Zionism, that's going to have to be a subject all of its own. There's just so much to that. But I want to point out that even the depraved individuals that decided to cover up a huge catastrophe that wiped out millions and millions of people, and to go in and kill the survivors, and to take over their lands and enslave them, even those jerks wouldn't rewrite the history books for the Zionists. And we still have a list of everywhere that they've been kicked out of, all throughout history. So even the guys behind the big cover-up here still wouldn't even put in a good note for the Zionists. Now look at, so in 1862, some areas in the U.S. finally kicked them out, but not just in general. And like I said, guys, we're one big loving family here, all right? And I'm not discriminating against any race of people in any way. And that's why I'm using the word the Zionists. Now, it just so happens that there's a lot of Zionists that are making a lot of things bad for all the rest of us, but I'm not blaming a whole group of people for anything. Just like black people shouldn't be blaming all the white people for what a few people did. And in later videos, I'm going to explain the slave trade. And guess who sent all the slaves over after this accident? But here's what Ulysses S. Grant had to say about these Zionists. Up here, he's talking about how they wouldn't even issue permits. And yes, it was needed. You had to have a permit to buy cotton. And we'll get into that in North America. But you had to have a permit to buy cotton back in these days. Still in 1862, okay? I'll get into that. But as a class violating every regulation of trade establishment by the U.S. Treasury Department are hereby expelled from the department. Within 24 hours from the receipt of this order by post commanders, they will see that all this class of people are furnished with passes required to leave. And anyone returning after such notification will be arrested and held in confinement until an opportunity occurs of sending them out as prisoners, unless they are furnished with the permits, the trade permits from these headquarters. And then part 3 of that order, no permits will be given these people to visit headquarters for the purpose of making personal application for trade permits. So that's a no and a no and a no. Egypt, early 19th century, looked like this. Remember all the water erosion on the Sphinx? Out in the desert? Where'd all the water come from? Why is it buried 20 feet high? 19th century. Oh, and I want to throw in that Egyptology started. It started in the beginning of the 18th century, because we've all heard that hieroglyphs were a dead language, right? Just nobody knows anything about these Egyptians. They died out thousands of years ago. Dead language, nobody knows anything about. So we had these pictures, early 19th century. Let's look at Rome here real quick. And you see this 20 feet of mud here that they've been digging out all of these ruins? How much work has already been done? I mean, how many years have they already been digging this out? And who did the digging? Better believe it wasn't the house of Grimaldi. What else we got here? So, all right. Before I click this last tab and send it all home, let's just recap everything here. So, all these guys were friends. Napoleon all of a sudden took over all the world here, but we know that they weren't allowed down in this area up until a specific time. So let's take a look at historic Rome from the early 19th century, or from the 19th century. Okay, historic black and white photos. Boom, look at all this magnificent architecture. Look at how huge everything is. I mean, this stuff, guys, do you see buildings like this being built anymore? And where are all the people? This is not a rhetorical question. Where are all the people? Where are all the people? Where are all the people? Now look here. Look what we start seeing right in the middle of Rome. You see that Egyptian obelisk? Where are all the people? Oh, we got like 10 or 20 people now in a whole city. Look at the size of this statue right here. Look at this guy. Look at the size of this statue. are all the people?
Stop seeing that.
Where are all the people? Once again, Egyptian obelisk. Once again, Egyptian obelisk. Once again, Egyptian obelisk. We're getting to the good part here, guys. And now look at this amazing building. I don't know if this is still here. I'd love to go to Rome one of these days. But look at this amazing big building, all right? Look at it in comparison to these guys. These guys are as big as the guy's foot, okay? Now, 19th century Rome. Here is a pyramid right in the middle of 19th century Rome. But the Egyptians died out 2,000 years ago. Nobody knew about the Egyptians, right? Nobody had seen the pyramids. What's on these obelisks? Egyptian hieroglyphics. I think this is the same one. We're going to get to another one, though. Obelisk in the middle of Rome. No people. Obelisk. And right here, boom. Very clear for all to see. Egyptian hieroglyphics in Rome in the 19th century. Okay? So for 2,000 years, or for 1,500 years, nobody knew anything about each other from here to here. For 1,500 years. Let's go back to Occam's razor. The simplest solution is usually the best. When you've eliminated the impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, must be the truth. Now, guys, I want to hear it. Put it in the comments below. Which is more believable here? That this lake, just like the other lakes all around the world, and guys down in Brazil, I've seen you guys on there. I'm glad you guys are on board. Guys, look at these maps. Go into the Stanford Library, crank the date back to like 1650, and then start looking at all the maps before then, because that's where the change was. You guys will find the big lake that I already know about that's right over to the east of Lake Titicaca. You guys got wiped out over there. Don't let them lie to you. So we've got these big, huge lakes up in the mountains, and we know that this happens after an earthquake, and that this happens after just a little fat flash flood. What if something the size of Madagascar that was up in the mountains suddenly gave way and formed things like this on one side of the world, formed things like this on the other side of the world? Same exact thing with the Fish River and the Grand Canyon. Now, is this a stretch of the imagination to believe that earthquakes hit after the time of the making of this map and just devastated the whole region? I mean, is that a stretch of the imagination? And I'm serious. I want to see your comments down there right now. Go down there and tell me which one makes more sense. Static history, what I'm telling you happened, or penguin history? That's Sylvie's term for it, so I'm going with it. And I'll try to leave the links in there. If you guys haven't been over to New Earth, she is an excellent researcher. She's very good at the culture. She knows all about the cultures. But her and I are both working independently on opposite sides of the world, coming up with information about this. So I'll leave that up to you guys to decide what's going on. But which one makes more sense? Seriously, go down, hit the comments. If you haven't hit the like button right now, please. It's going to help get this message out to more people. Hit subscribe, because I got way, way more to come. All right? There's much more to come. And that's it. I'm just going to leave it right here, guys. Which one makes more sense? What you've been told about all these wars and how brutal the old world was and how nobody cared about human life or anything sacred or anything. They were just barbarians, and they were throwing orgies all over the place, and they were depraved. Who are the depraved ones, guys? Who are the ones that we hear Pizzagate about? And who are the Harvey Weinsteins that are over in Hollywood telling you exactly what to believe, while they themselves are the most despicable people on earth? All right? Which one makes more sense? Static history or penguin history? So, I'm going to throw this out there, guys. I'm working really hard to get all this information out. I've got 2 days of actual work lined up next week. I'm going to keep trying to find some more work and making a lot of money, because I've got plans for this summer. We are taking a road trip, and I need to get geared up for this. There's a lot of ground to cover, and I mean actual ground to cover, like spring training right now. Guys, I've already been to these places. I don't need a map. I can show you things that I can't show you from behind a computer. So if anybody wants to help out, I do have a Patreon set up. It's Static in the Attic on Patreon. I'll try to figure out how to... I was having problems getting it down in the links. If anybody wants to help out here, it would be much appreciated. And I'm also going to tell you guys, my knowledge of history is a drop in the bucket compared to what I've got for this world right now. But it takes money to get what I've got going. All right? So I'm working really hard, guys. I'm doing everything that I possibly can. It's not my timeline that I'm running on. All right, I've learned this a long time ago. My timeline and God's timeline, I just don't even worry about my timeline anymore. When it's the right time, I know it's the right time. All right, that's all I got to say. But I'm trying to help, guys. I really am. And if you guys can help me, then that just means it's the faster that I can help other people. All right. So I know this is tough, guys. I mean, I know there's cognitive dissonance. I know that some people are going to be in denial at first. I know all the stages, guys, because I've been through it. But once it clicks, once it all clicks, you're going to see through all of the illusion. And I hate to be bringing a story of death and destruction. I really do. But the truth needs to be told. And everybody needs to wake up to it. And I don't think they're going to take this channel down, because I think it's divine right. It's divine law. It's above the law of any man. I don't think they can take this down. I think they have to let this information get out, and all that they're allowed to do is subvert it and launch disinfo campaigns. But it's every man and woman's right to make up their own mind about what they believe. So I'd like to know what everybody's thinking. Seriously, guys, am I crazy here? Because this makes a lot of sense to me. All right, so put it in the comments down below. That's also going to help get this out to more people. And so I'm going to leave this right here with the story of the two monks. So these two monks were traveling cross country after this big storm. And they came up to a long puddle in the road, and there was a really fair, beautiful young lady there dressed in all silk robes, waiting to cross the puddle, but she didn't want to get all dirty. So the older monk, he just walked over, he picked her up, and he took off walking across the puddle, and then he set her down on the other side, never said a word, and just kept on walking. And then the younger monk, for miles, his head was just running, man. The wheels were turning. He's going, well, what about and what if? And then finally, after about 5 miles, he stops the older monk and he said, "Brother, you picked that lady up back there. Were you not worried about your vows? Were you not worried about being tempted?" And the old monk just simply replied, I left that lady at the other side of the mud puddle, but you've been carrying her this whole way. Guys, leave your old dogmas in the mud. Just leave it behind. Just drop it like a bad habit. You don't need it anymore. Welcome to the awakening. It's time to move forward. All right? Just drop them. And all the darkness in the world can't put out the light of one single candle. So let that light shine, guys. Love to everybody. Peace to everybody. We're all one big, loving, happy family. And we're going to get through this. We're all going to get through this together. I love you guys. Take care of yourselves. Static out. What's up, YouTube? Static in the Attic. Welcome back. I wanted to show you this quick demonstration on how to escape quicksand while I do a little intro. But notice they're just on a regular beach, and watch what happens. Now, I know there's a few new people to my channel that aren't exactly familiar with mud flood because of the weather videos that I put out, so welcome to something that might kind of blow your mind here. And to you veteran mud flooders, be nice. You don't know what you don't know, and there was a time when this concept was new to all of us. But just look at what is happening just from the weight of 20 people jumping up and down on a beach. That is just absolutely turning in. I mean, that looks like they're walking across a trampoline already. And while this is going, I went back through the comments on some of my earlier videos, and it was pretty comical. But one thing I noticed was a few people were calling me a teacher. And especially the haters. Oh, some teacher you are. You can't even think of blah, blah, because you just spent 20 hours researching and your mind is kind of fried and you couldn't think of Lake Michigan. And all I can say is I don't consider myself a teacher because that would imply that I am no longer a student. And in the beginner's mind, there are many possibilities, but in the experts, there are few. And I will share some more Zen at the end of this video. But look at this. Look at what just happened just from 20 people jumping up and down on the sand. Now this lady just walks down and sinks down in there. So if you've got a 4-story building sitting on top of here, what's going to happen to that 4-story building? Evidence all around the world, folks. So let's start way back here. And so I was doing the videos on weather modifications, and then it all just tied together here. So let's do it. As water supply reaches record low, California combats drought with Black Ops weather control technology from the Vietnam War. In January, this was, 14. In January, ex-Emperor Brown declared a state of emergency, and California's Department of Water Resources said it would reduce the supply of water reservoirs, blah, blah, blah. And I've just done a few videos talking about all of the .gov California records showing all of the cloud seeding operations. It's no secret. The electric companies have been doing it since the 50s to make sure that the reservoirs are full so that their generators are running so they can make more money. It's just that damn simple. If you follow the money, you're going to find it every time. Cloud seeding involves spraying fine particles of silver iodide, which is usually burnt. It doesn't say it here, but they burn the silver iodide, and they have ground generators pumping stuff up, and boom, you've got rain. Mike Morales, I keep promoting his channel because he is showing that for what's been hitting California, they have got ships out in the ocean spraying what he calls bunker fuel. I still don't know exactly what that is. I'll look into it, but you can see the trail of the ships out there just doing circles out in the Pacific, and then I'm over here recording all of the planes flying over spraying. And we're getting nonstop rain for 4 months in Southern California. I got to say, finally this morning, it's finally spring, guys. I can always tell. It's every year it happens. So what I was saying.
Anthony, where do you want to go? Where do you want to start? Well, we already started, but where do you want to go next, or start anew here?
Well, you know, people have heard a lot of discussions I've had about CERN, and that would be a natural place to go to. Kind of want to go through the calendar this year.
Okay.
And we can pick out different pieces out of that calendar because people like timelines, but I'm not a date setter. What I'm going to do is share with you the calendar from CERN and then the associated things that I have tacked on to that calendar that are going on in the rest of the world. And that involves the Vatican. So
all right,
you want
now
to
it's
there?
a party. Yeah. It's rock.
All right.
All right.
Well, what I'm reading from is CERN's, what they call their injector accelerator schedule.
Yes,
And this really tells you what the machine is going to be doing. And I'm just going to pick out a couple of things without getting too elaborate with it. May 1st of this year is May Day. That's in celebration of Axis Mundi. That is the axis of the earth. That is the connection between heaven and earth. So what we're talking about here in this discussion of CERN, and we'll be talking about with quantum computers as well, is the spiritual world, because that's what's at play with the physics at CERN. And this is all being directed through the Jesuit Society, of which the director of the Council of CERN and the director for engineering and computation at CERN, both are Jesuits. This is a Jesuit-led organization, and the calendar I'm sharing with you is built by the Jesuits. So when we talk about Axis Mundi and the connection between heaven and earth, we are talking about the discussion many times of connecting planets from CERN, specifically with Saturn.
I find that fascinating.
So
The trying to connect, and we know that there's a hexagram on the one side of Saturn, and many believe it's a portal and a gateway. And for folks who might not be familiar with Anthony Pator's work on CERN, CERN is a particle accelerator that is in Switzerland. It's the biggest machine of its kind in the world, and I'm not even going to try to explain any more of the technical aspects of it because I will just make a fool of myself. I'll leave that to you. But yeah, the spiritual world is something that I want to hit on. So when we get there, because there are reasons why this is in the spiritual world, what they're not only trying to do is open up portals, but what we're seeing is what we saw or what happened back in the beginning after the creation, where, you know, with the Tower of Babel and Nimrod, a one-world government, trying to build a stairway or portal to heaven to overthrow God. This is where we're going with this. So I'm going to turn it back over to you, Mr. Patch.
no, and I'll try to make my comment short because I would like to hear from you guys. Usually on your programs, your guest is just running for several minutes in a discussion, and I would like to have more of a conversation with you gentlemen.
We can do that.
Okay. So we've got May 1st as May Day. And it is also in France, in particular with the Labour Party, they're calling for a day of strike. In fact, a worldwide strike on May 1st. May 8th, with the collider itself, they will be firing up, so to speak, their newest collider, their newest accelerator, I should be more specific, which is called Awake. And that is a linear accelerator. It's only 30 meters long, but it's been conjoined with the 27-kilometer main ring of the Large Hadron Collider. They have two accelerators merged now since November of last year when they did their first startup with Awake. What this means by joining these two is you have 1,000-fold increase in the power derived from the collisions. And those collisions will be targeted, and I'll get to more specifics on time, but they are targeting the north area at the center point of the main ring, and that is where they will be introducing the DNA of Osiris, Nimrod, who built the Tower of Babel. The purpose of the DNA is resurrection. The purpose of CERN is resurrection of the dead. So if you want to jump in there.
Is that the resurrection of the dead? Are we talking spiritual beings, or are we talking, demonic entities that used to inhabit human bodies? Are we talking about human beings?
We're not talking. I mean, when we say resurrection of the dead, we're not talking actual. What one would say resurrection of the dead. We're talking about something different, right?
We are talking about the dead in the abyss.
Okay.
Because CERN is the doorway to the abyss.